Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Every Man's Thoughts. In today's video, we're going to cover the new images released from the Empire Magazine exclusive. Nothing I'd really consider a spoiler here, so with that, let's get started. So the first image we're going to talk about today is also the most disappointing. Not because it's the worst picture we're going to show, but because it is a character we still had a lot of hope for, and that's Celebrimbor. When we saw the earlier pictures of Elrond, I assume he was made to look small so that Galadriel could look big by comparison. Now it looks like it's happening to Celebrimbor as well. Look at these two side by side. They are interchangeable. No sense of gravitas, no sense of import. Compare them to Peter Jackson's elves and you begin to understand just how insignificant these characters feel. This is the man that is manipulated by Sauron into making the Rings of Power. If he is insignificant, then so is Sauron's achievement, and that's at the heart of what this entire show is about. This doesn't look like a Tolkien elf. This looks like the Vulcan ambassador to the Federation from Star Trek Next Generation. I don't want to be completely negative, and I'm happy to talk about a positive for a moment, and that is Gilgalad. The picture on the left is from the recent Empire Magazine exclusives. The picture on the right is from the trailer. Unlike Celebrimbor and Elrond, immediately upon looking at Gilgalad, you can tell he has a sense of importance, a different connotation about him. This character could have his rightful place standing next to the Peter Jackson elves. I hate to keep mentioning it, but that's the bar by which this show is going to be judged. Regrettably, I don't know how much screen time we're going to get out of Gilgalad. Amazon seems inexplicably focused on new characters instead of highlighting those that are already legend. Speaking of which, where is Isildur, or for that matter, where is Celeborn? I'm guessing Galadriel having a husband doesn't fit the narrative and he's going to be MIA for a while. Next, we have an up-close image of a frost troll. This scene was part of the trailer. That's Galadriel holding the torch. And if you recall, there was a subscriber-only cover art edition for Empire Magazine by John Howe himself. Now, I'm gonna take a wait-and-see attitude here. The creature doesn't feel right to me, but when it comes to monsters, cinematography is everything in how they play on screen. Some darker lighting, maybe a ferocious growl, I don't know. Color me optimistic. Sadly, next we go back into the dumpster fire with the Harfoots. If you haven't seen the meme yet, you're welcome. Based on my own videos and other internet interactions, I feel comfortable saying that the Harfoots were a storyline that absolutely nobody was asking for. I'm guessing they were put in the show to make it more relatable to children and the family unit in general. However, I suspect Amazon's going to learn that if you try and please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. Now, some of the overall aesthetic I do like. I get it. This is thousands of years in the past. They're more primitive than the hobbits that we're used to. And some things look spot on. Those lanterns look amazing. But the overall vibe is just off and they feel alien to Tolkien's world. I hope I'm wrong. By contrast, Moria and the dwarves that reside within are something that the fans have shown considerable interest in. So here we have Durin IV and Princess Disa. Look, I'm just going to skip over the fact that someone who lives underground has darker skin tones, completely contrary to the original books. That path has been well traveled. Speaking of Disa, I really like her hair. I love that thick braiding. Braiding like that always plays well on screen, and it's befitting a dwarf. Durin's beard is okay. I would have liked to have seen more artistry involved in it, maybe the character taking pride in its presentation. Perhaps some dwarven handcrafted golden beard ornaments, or maybe some braiding of its own. It's just there. In fact, while we're on the topic of beards, where is Disa's beard? In Middle-earth, dwarven women have beards. I understand that in any adaptation, certain changes have to be made. It's just inevitable. For example, let's talk about Durin IV, who's sitting right there. The name Durin is not hereditary passed from father to son as it is portrayed in the show. In fact, it's as much a title as it is a name, and it's based on the perceived reincarnation of the spirit of the original Durin himself. Now, I can see how that would be a convoluted mechanic to convey with just a few minutes of television, especially since they've ill-advisedly consolidated the timeline and there would be no gap between the different iterations of Durin. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that I like it, but I'm a reasonable person, so I can understand it. So please, give me a good reason why Disa doesn't have a beard. In every fantasy setting, there are unique idiosyncrasies that give that specific world its identity, its charm, none more so than Tolkien and Middle-earth. So when you strip away that identity, this just becomes generic fantasy number 5, Moria edition. For now, I'm going to assume this was another questionable decision they made to make the show more relatable to a wider audience. Alright, I want to take this back into a positive direction with this photo of a man standing in a tower overlooking the valley. Now, there's nothing particularly special about this photo except it just works, and when something works, it works. It draws you in and entices the mind. You can't help but wonder, is this Sauron himself overlooking his soon-to-be empire? Does that mountain he's standing on now become the legendary tower? That does seem to be a very unique geographical feature. The photo doesn't have an official caption, so we'll never know for sure, but then again, this is what a promotional photo should be doing, is eliciting some wonderment. Maybe this isn't Sauron at all, maybe this is Arondir looking over the lands of his people before Sauron comes and takes it. I don't know what's going on, but I do know I want to know, and that's the point. Okay guys, so we only have a few left, so I'm going to start hitting the high points. The last one I find really interesting is this dinner party with Durin, Elrond, Celebrimbor, Gilgalad, and possibly Galadriel with her back to us. The dinner is obviously in elven lands, with Gilgalad, the likely host, at the head of one end of the table, and Durin, the presumed guest of honor, at the head of the other end. We know at some point Celebrimbor and the dwarves get together and begin forging some rings, presumably not the rings of power, but magical rings nonetheless. What we don't know is the relationship between all of the other dwarves and all of the other elves. Notice here in the picture that there is a toast, but the only ones raising their glasses are Durin and Celebrimbor. Could be meaningless, could be something significant, only time will tell. This is a picture of Galadriel's companion Halbrand. Nothing special here, but it does feel like this might be after they landed in Numenor. And lastly, we have what looks like Arondir, Theo, and Bronwyn. Now, I've said in the past, I do believe the source material could support a darker-skinned elf. Elves fleeing the War of Wrath went to areas near Harad where people had darker complexions. If those two groups of people intermingled, which is exactly what this story is about, then there you have it, darker-skinned elves. When the show was announced, one of the first things I said was I hope to see a fully developed Harad, a culture completely distinct from what we normally see in the Tolkien adaptations. When the show then said they were going to be in the area of Harad, I got even more excited. Unfortunately now, from what we can see so far, they've just whitewashed the whole thing, made it look like every place else, but hey, there's a black elf, so thanks for nothing. I also have no real interest in the so-called forbidden love story. In order for that elf to have obtained his darker skin in the first place, there would have had to have been generations of intermingling already. My hope is that the background story in the area shows us a Harad that's more distinct than it first appears, and that the three get involved in something more interesting than a subplot that was already done in the Hobbit trilogy. Well guys, that's it for me. Please subscribe for all the latest fantasy entertainment news, and I will see you next time.